let me start on behalf of the Communist Party by congratulating Richard and the other comrades who took the initiative in calling this meeting. It's an overdue initiative because one has to have a sense of the drama of what is happening, and Lindsay and Richard have both referred to this. Today, a bomb was dropped from an aircraft on the municipal headquarters in Lugansk. And I hope that if the British government was dropping bombs on Newcastle Town Hall at the moment, the left elsewhere in Europe would be doing more about it rather than saying it's a legitimate response to the possible threat of Alex Salmond moving south from an independent Scotland. This is unprecedented in this century in Europe, and it is time that the left in this country got together a response to it. In the time that I have, the brief time, I only want to touch on 2 or 3 questions. The first is this question of, is it a fascist government, a fascist regime in Kiev? And I think, as Lindsay has said, it's a bit of a, come to get a bit of an abstruse question. Fascism is as fascism does. And certainly every effort is made to conceal the nature of the regime, and more, no doubt, will be done in the near future. We now have Poroshenko, who's always described as as somebody that makes chocolate to try and, I suppose, make him look a bit more... Of course, he doesn't make chocolate, he makes money. That's what oligarchs do. The chocolate is purely a secondary consideration, and he is, I suppose, the sweetener on the bitter pill of the regime in Kiev, trying to give it a more sanitised face for Western consumption in particular. And there's an argument that we can all take comfort from the fact that the overtly fascist candidates only got 2% of the vote. Now, that's a great comfort indeed if you think that fascism only comes to power through elections. That's tremendous, that's game over. But of course, if you look at history, that's never been the case. Fascism comes to power generally when it is assisted all the way there by the sort of oligarchic interests that are clearly in power in Kiev. And what has this regime done? Some of it has been referred to already. There was the horrific massacre in Odessa, the bombings in Donetsk and Luhansk, the attack on Slavyansk. Those are, in a sense, the worst episodes because they have led to a major loss of life. But in addition, there are sort of what one might call historically fascist-type things going on. The Communist Party, which had 13% of the vote in the last Ukrainian elections, has been banned. Its leader has had his house in Kiev burnt down. Its headquarters have been taken over by far-right gangs. We've seen the attempt to ban the Russian language stalled for now, as I think Richard said. We've seen the rehabilitation of the Bandera, the overt rehabilitation of the Bandera group, which killed, according to best estimates, off its own bat, about 100,000 Ukrainians of Jewish or Polish or Russian extraction, or simply pro-communist extraction during the Second World War, and he is now being treated as a national icon. These are all sort of clues as to the nature of the regime that is installed in Kiev, and it is baffling why some people on the left in Britain who will cry fascist every time a crackpot UKIP councillor emerges in Skegness will not acknowledge that this is fascism pure being installed in the Ukraine. Of course, we don't know how the regime may evolve given the powerful Western sponsorship, the powerful Western grip over it, but certainly now fascism is doing what fascism does, which is break down any resistance to oligarchic capitalist power. The second point I wanted to make is to underline the responsibility that the European Union and NATO bear for this situation. This shouldn't have come as a surprise that since 1991, Ukraine has been the 3rd largest recipient of so-called US aid anywhere in the world, only behind Egypt and Israel. Israel's now the odd one out, and that an elected government hasn't been overthrown. But Ukraine is therefore in the spotlight. The project for the new American century, the sort of foundational document of modern neoconservatism, said as its priority number 1, even before they got onto Iraq, we must not allow any reconstitution of any hostile power in the former Soviet space. We must keep Ukraine out of the Russian orbit. That strategic outlook informed the crisis that started unfolding towards the end of last year, that when the hapless Yanukovych, and I don't think we need to say we're not holding him up as a model, elected as he however was, when he suggested, why don't we have tripartite talks between the EU, Russia and the Ukraine, you'd have thought that's a pretty simple and straightforward idea, given what everyone knows about the divided nature of opinion in the Ukraine. That was vetoed on the spot by Van Rompuy and Barroso, the leaders of the European Union, because they wanted a takeover. They wanted to make their move. And then, of course, with the far more powerful backing of the United States, which has already been referred to, they made the move, and a government has been installed, which was drawn up in NATO offices and in Washington by Victoria Nuland and the others. And it is, apart from everything else, a neoliberal government. The first thing it did was put gas prices up for consumers in the Ukraine by about 60%. And they're not planning on passing any of that money on to Russia, it would seem, unless they're coerced. Huge cuts in pensions, layoffs in the public sector. This, of course, again, should not be a surprise, given that is what the EU is mandating in countries that are a long part of the EU, nearer to home, from Greece to Spain to Portugal to Ireland. But again, some comrades on the left don't see this and try and sort of prettify the EU interventions. If the EU over there was a benign force as opposed to the EU over here. And this is the danger, apart from the immediate dangers facing the Ukrainian people, is a danger of the threat of further war. This intervention in the Ukraine takes its place in its essence alongside the other interventions we've seen since 1991, designed to expand and entrench the New World Order, as it was called, based around the hegemony of American power. And if the expansion of the EU and NATO doesn't lead to a war now in Ukraine, we can be sure it is going to lead to a war somewhere sooner rather than later, and the time to mobilise against that is now. And we have to be putting pressure on the British government. It's no use trying to protest about, I mean, I agree with everything Lindsay said about Putin, for the record. It's no use trying to protest about Putin if we're not doing something about our government here and what it is doing, and the unequivocal support that Cameron and Hague have hypocritically given to what is going on there. Of course, they are slightly anxious about Knightsbridge property values, which if they have to take sanctions against Russians, they're worried there might be a collapse. Perhaps the chocolate man will make good the difference and prop that up. But that, apart from the City of London's role as an international money laundering machine, they are fully supporting this action. And we have to be clear and I think rally and unite not just the left, but all democratic and trade union forces to try and get an understanding and action on this issue. At the moment, we have, I apologise if I end slightly polemically, we have a sort of Basil Fawlty left on this, which doesn't want to talk about the war, which wants to find possibly a strike in the Ukraine to talk, and I like strikes as much as the next person, to talk about instead of focusing on this. And that is not a socialist position, that's an ostrich position, denying the reality of what is going on. And we have, even worse, I'm afraid, a sort of Prince Charles left lining up. Well, obviously Prince Charles can well know the royal family's experience of what looks like Hitler, but this focus on Putin when our enemy is at home. So I want to fully support the demands that have been outlined for basing this campaign going forward, and to say we have to unite around it. I read in one left piece about this whole Ukraine situation about how the anti-imperialist consensus that was developed around the opposition to the war in Iraq has now broken down because some people are not joining in the hysteria against Russia. Well, the only way an anti-imperialist consensus breaks down is if people become pro-imperialist. And we have to take a stand here in Britain, a power that is the main ally of the United States throughout the whole drive for a new world order, which is standing with the United States in backing the Kiev government in its horrendous assault on its own people. We have to say our drive has to be to demand that our government stops supporting EU and NATO expansion, stops supporting the Kiev government, and we have to fight as a united left for those demands. Thank you.